Chris here from Real Rideshare Stories. If you're new to the channel and you're looking for different things within the rideshare industry, whether it's updates to what's going on, news, tips and tricks for passengers and drivers, or what actually happens on real rideshare rides, start now by hitting that subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications. Also, make sure to check the description below for other helpful information and tips. Well, Uber has found another way to screw its drivers, and it does it with the new updated terms of the sick pay. So we're going to go over that. We're going to go over the changes that it made, what it used to be to what it is now, and how they are screwing over drivers. So this is from Uber blog, which is right from Uber itself. Link will be in the description below. So if you want to check this out and read it more in full or reference back to it, check that out there. And this is an update on COVID-19 financial assistance, or also known as sick pay from Uber. And they changed the program. They started the program in March, and then they changed it on April 10th. So it was just a couple of days ago. So they updated this article onto what is the new changes, and that's what we're going to be talking about right now. So first of all, the reason why they changed the policy is because they originally launched support too few drivers in the process of getting funds, which was complicating and confusing to a lot of drivers. Not only that, a lot of drivers were going out and trying to get the sick pay, didn't really know what was going on. They never heard anything from Uber. It may have taken several days. They had to blast on Twitter. There were a lot of issues with it. I had talked about some of the reasons why it took so long for some people to get responses back, but people who are actually putting in what they thought was the proper documentation, they were still getting their claims denied. So it was causing even more confusion and pissing a lot of people off in the process. So they changed the policy around a little bit, and they said they're focusing their assistance on those who are still actively driving and delivering during the crisis, and expanding eligibility to include drivers and delivery people who have been told to individually quarantine because they have pre-existing conditions that put them at a higher risk of suffering serious illness from COVID-19. Now that is part good, and this is where people with pre-existing conditions or have autoimmune issues or asthma or whatever it might be that can cause even more serious illness from COVID-19, then this is actually a good thing. But overall, it's actually not, because what they're doing is then this next little part. And they say because this will mean more people are eligible than under the old policy, they're choosing to establish a maximum per person payment to make this new policy more sustainable. So that means they're going to put max amount limits on what city and market you drive in to get that 14-day sick pay. And that's where they're screwing drivers, and we're going to cover that in just a moment. What they're doing under the new policy is to be eligible, you have to have an active case of coronavirus, or you are individually ordered to self-quarantine because you are suspected to have an active case, or you are individually ordered to self-quarantine because you have a pre-existing health condition that puts you at a higher risk of serious illness due to this. So they're talking about then instructions on how you can apply for financial assistance, which is right there at that link. So they say we're going to aim to process the request in 7 business days. And I've talked about that in previous videos where each application has to be manually reviewed by a person. It's not something that's based upon the algorithm. So that is something that, like I said, I will give them the benefit of the doubt because it's going to take that time, especially since they're not running at full capacity. So if it is not done in 7 business days, just know it will be processed at some point. So hopefully it will be sooner. If it takes over 2 weeks, please notify Uber, blast them on Twitter, whatever you have to do. But like I said, each one has to be manually reviewed. And before you apply, carefully review the requirements listed at this link right here. And then when you apply, your Uber account will be temporarily put on hold as a safety measure to help limit the spread of COVID-19, which again, I said in a previous video that we talked about where, yes, if you put that in there, they're going to try to stop the spread. And that means they're going to temporarily deactivate you for 14 days. And again, anything after that time frame, you have to get in contact with Uber and see what's going on and why you haven't been reactivated if your 2 weeks is already up. So even though the account is on hold, they still need to review the application. And then what some of the changes are from the old policy to the new policy, they're talking about eligibility criteria. So they're saying drivers and delivery people could be eligible if they had completed one trip or delivery in the 30 days before March 6th when they announced the policy. The new policy is talking about active drivers and delivery people where they have to complete one trip or delivery in the 30 days before the date you submitted documents or the date you reached out to Uber for financial assistance, whichever one is earlier. So they're making that change to support drivers who are still on the road. And then this is where they're going to screw drivers on the changing right here and the next one after that. So this one is where it starts. So the previous policy is they calculated the payment for an individual driver or delivery person based on the average weekly earnings over 6 months before March 6th. So if you were a full-time driver or if you were averaging a good amount of daily earnings, like let's say $100 a day you went out and that's what you were averaging because you were out all the time, you would get $1,400. And that was because essentially it would be the daily average times 14. And now in the new policy, they're going to look at the average weekly earnings over the 3 months before the application for assistance. But better yet, right here, they're putting in a maximum amount of individual payment. And that says with the previous policy, they paid up to 14 days of support, which was based on the individual driver delivery person's historical earnings alone. So it didn't matter where you are. It didn't matter what market you were in. If you drove a lot and made a lot of money, you would get a higher amount of sick pay. It was pretty fair because based on how much you drove. If you were part-time or just did it 1 or 2 days and you weren't making too much, then your amount of sick pay would be again, equivalent to the amount that you were driving, which does seem fair, and that was great. But now under the new policy, while they're continuing to offer up to 14 days of financial assistance, they're setting a maximum payment amount, screwing drivers. So the maximum amount of differs by city because they are based on a typical earnings for drivers and delivery people in each city. So it's based on an average for that city of what people are bringing in, and that's where they're capping it off of. So if there's a few people out there who are extreme full-time 80 hours a week and they're getting out there and they're being exposing themselves much more, and somebody who's only going out once or twice a week or an hour or two or whatever it might be, that's all averaging together and that's creating a maximum payment. So that's really unfortunate. So they're going to continue the policy of giving you a minimum of $50 if you drive or deliver in the US and have only done one trip. So the minimum payment is going to differ by country. But here is what the maximum payments are going to look like in 3 different cities across the US. So if you drive in Los Angeles, California, and you hit that maximum, meaning your average daily earnings multiplied by the 14 days equals or is above $459 for 14 days, you're capped at that. So if you were making $100 a day on average, you would look at getting about $1,400 for the 14 days. And now you're capped to almost $1,000 less than that. So you would be paid $459. In Columbus, Ohio, it's even worse at $244 where you're capped off. And the Rio Grande Valley in Texas, only $136 to be capped at. So each city is going to be different. Each market is going to be different. And again, it's based on the average that all the people in that area have driven. And that's what the cap is going to be at. And they're saying that it's going to be because more drivers are eligible, so they want to make it more sustainable. But Dara, I thought you had $10 billion in cash. Am I wrong? So this just goes to show you how much Uber is actually screwing its drivers and don't really care. Because again, they could probably do that. And if they were actually going to care about its drivers, they would have implemented that system where all people are still based on the same pay structure, including pre-existing conditions, which would be now included. But apparently they don't. And that just shows right there. Now, I've said my piece and my opinions on this. What are your thoughts? What are your opinions? What do you think? Do you think that this maximum amount needs to be instilled because of it expanding the amount of people that sick pay now will cover or claiming to cover? Comment below and let me know. That's the end of this video. Make sure you subscribe and ring the bell for notifications so you'll be notified every time a new video is uploaded, as well as any updates to what's going on around with Uber, Lyft, gig economy, unemployment, other things like that, as well as the normal content that I normally produce and put out. So make sure you do hit that subscribe button. And also make sure to check the description below for other helpful information and tips, as well as a link to that article so you can read it a little bit more in full, straight from Uber. And as always, never drink and drive, always tip your drivers, and we'll see you next time.